This podcast contains descriptions of violence against children and adult language and is not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Hi everyone, and welcome to Suffer the Little Children, the podcast giving voices back to the victims of child abuse, murder, and their families. I'm your host, Lane, and this is episode 173, Macy Grace Ditty, Part 1. On December 2nd, 2015, 23-year-old U.S. Army Specialist Jeanie Ditty called 911 and calmly requested an ambulance for her 2-year-old daughter, Macy Grace, who she said had thrown up in her sleep and aspirated. As soon as Macy Grace arrived at the hospital, medical staff took one look at the bruises covering her from head to toe and called the Fayetteville Police, reporting probable child abuse. Tragically, Macy died 2 days later. This is the story of a young mother with a very slippery grasp on the concept of truth who told multiple stories about the events of that morning. It's also the story of a bright-eyed little girl who brought joy into the lives of everyone who loved her, and who, over 8 years after her murder, still hasn't received justice. This is part 1 of the mind-boggling story of Macy Grace Ditty. Before I jump in, I will let you know that this story is going to infuriate you. Just a reminder, all parties are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, and all accusations are alleged. Jeanie Cassandra Vengean was born in October 1992. Friends told the Fayetteville Observer that Jeanie had an unstable childhood. She attended high school first in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, before graduating from Stroudsburg High School. Even when she was a teenager, friends and acquaintances have since said Jeanie was attention-seeking, a complete hothead, temperamental, dishonest, manipulative, a narcissist, and very self-centered. By the end of this episode, I have no doubt you'll agree. After graduating, Jeanie reportedly wanted some discipline and direction, so she joined the military and attended basic training in Missouri. A fellow trainee remembered Jeanie often getting the entire bay of female soldiers in trouble. One night, she took a blanket and pillow and fell asleep on fire guard duty. For her antics, all of the women had to walk in circles around the bay. She had a penchant for causing drama and constantly demanded attention. Jeanie was stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where she met 18-year-old fellow soldier Kevin Charles Ditty. In 2012, the young couple was married. A couple of months later, Jeanie was pregnant, and she decided to leave the Army. An Army friend of Kevin's later described Jeanie, saying, "She has always played the victim and was very controlling and manipulative. That whole situation from the beginning was a red flag." Kevin was deployed for the entirety of Jeanie's pregnancy. At 2:17 a.m. on December 14, 2012, 19-year-old Jeanie gave birth to their daughter, Macy Grace Ditty, at the Womack Army Medical Center in Cumberland County, North Carolina. Kevin was able to return home when Macy Grace was a few days old. She was a healthy baby, weighing 8.5 pounds and measuring 20 inches in length. Macy's only health issue was a minor one. She required a frenectomy as an infant to resolve a tongue tie that could have led to a speech delay. It's fortunate that Macy Grace was such a healthy baby, in fact, because when she was 13 months old, her mother stopped taking her to her pediatrician altogether. Jeanie was full of excuses for this neglectful behavior. She had to work, she was busy, Macy was fine and didn't need to see the doctor. Throughout that time, Jeanie worked at a number of places, including a gym, a car dealership, and an oral surgeon's office. Throughout her short life, Macy Grace spent a good deal of time with her mom's extended family, including Jeanie's Aunt Michelle and Uncle Bobby. You'll hear my conversation in Part 2 with Michelle, who came into Jeanie's life when Jeanie was 5 and remained close to her as the years passed. Michelle had a special bond with Macy Grace, who FaceTimed her Aunt Shelley every morning. Jeanie even left Macy with Michelle and Bobby for the entire month of December 2014, which included Macy Grace's 2nd birthday. What was Jeanie doing that entire time? As Michelle describes it, Jeanie was out doing Jeanie. By this time, Jeanie had told Kevin she wanted a divorce. She refused to tell Kevin where their daughter was for that entire month, so he wasn't even able to call Macy Grace on her birthday. On January 15, 2015, Sergeant Kevin Ditty of the 108th Air Defense Artillery Brigade was deployed for the second time to the United Arab Emirates. Kevin did his best to keep in touch with Macy through Skype while on deployment. According to one of Jeanie's military friends, Anthony Williams, Kevin loved them both tremendously. They had their marital issues, but he loved Macy so much. Even before their separation, Jeanie was reportedly seeing other men. One man who particularly grabbed her interest was Zachary Earl Kiefer, a Special Forces medical sergeant and Purple Heart recipient who served in the military for 12 years. Zach, who was 31, was about 9 years older than 22-year-old Jeanie. He also happened to be married. He and his wife, Lisa, had a young daughter of their own. Even so, he began dating Jeanie in the spring of 2015. Zach was also the owner of Extreme Fitness Incorporated, where he worked as a personal trainer who specialized in getting competitors ready for bikini and bodybuilding competitions. Not coincidentally, Jeanie participated in bodybuilding competitions in North Carolina. In 2014, according to the website for the North Carolina chapter of the National Physique Committee, she placed 11th in a bikini competition. Considering her boyfriend's military status, Jeanie suddenly became interested in re-enlisting in the military. In April 2015, she returned to active duty at Fort Bragg, where she held the rank of Specialist, or SPC, in the 525th Military Intelligence Brigade. Jeanie and Macy lived in the Stone Ridge Apartments in the 1800 block of Stone Mason Court in Fayetteville, North Carolina. On December 1, 2015, Jeanie took Macy Grace to the Womack Army Medical Center, saying the baby was suffering from diarrhea and vomiting. Macy Grace was diagnosed with infectious gastroenteritis and colitis and sent home. Jeanie later reported that Macy Grace went to bed around 9 p.m. and slept until between 8 and 9 the following morning, waking up briefly only to go back to sleep at 10 a.m. At about 10:15 a.m. on December 2, 2015, Jeanie called Zach, who came to the apartment, where Macy Grace was vomiting, her jaw clenched. While Zach attempted to clear Macy's airway, Jeanie called 911 to request an ambulance. I don't have the words to describe her icy cold demeanor during that call, so I'll let you hear it for yourself.
Cumberland County 911, what's the address of the emergency?
1811 Stone Mason Court.
One moment. Say Stone Mason or Stony Mason?
Stone Mason Court.
1 second.
Apartment D.
That's D as in David?
Yes.
Off the Stone Carriage Circle?
I think so. It's in Stone Ridge Apartment Complex.
Verified. May I have the phone number you're calling from? Verified. And your name?
Jeanie, Jeanie.
And your last name?
Ditty, D as in David, Itty.
Okay, tell me exactly what happened.
Okay, I just need an ambulance. My daughter's been sick the past couple of days and whatnot, and she was just taking a nap. She's home on quarters from her doctor.
Tell me what symptoms she's having so we know who to dispatch.
Well, she's unresponsive right now. Like, she's barely, breathing very light. She started puking in her sleep and started choking.
Okay. Is she passed out? Is she unconscious?
She's, you could see her breathing, but she's not responding to me.
Okay. Is she awake?
A little bit, yes.
Okay.
But her eyes are like slits.
Okay, gotcha. One moment. I'm going to go ahead and drop this information for EMS. 1 second.
Okay.
But she is breathing?
Yes.
Okay. Are you with
But it sounds like she's having a hard time.
Okay. Are you with the patient now?
I had to step outside. My fiance's inside with her because I have no service in my apartment, but he's a paramedic himself.
Okay.
So he's with her.
How old is the patient?
She'll be 3, so she's 2.5 right now.
Okay. Is she awake right now? I have to ask you the question again.
She should be. Hang on 1 second. It might cut out.
Okay.
You awake? She woke up for a minute.
Would that be yes, no, or unknown?
She's breathing, but she
okay. No,
came to for a minute.
My only question is she awake? Is that yes, no, or unknown? Go ahead. I'm waiting.
She's only reacting to pain.
Okay. You didn't answer the question, but one moment.
For the question. She was just awake.
Okay, you said she's breathing. 1 second.
My boyfriend says she's ANO times 1.
Is her breathing, you said her breathing is not normal. I'll go ahead and put that in there. Okay. Can you get close enough to her so that we can check her breathing together?
Well, my boyfriend, he's doing all that right now. He's a paramedic.
Okay.
Hang on, I'll just...
Sounds clear, and let me put a note in there that we didn't check it and why. 1 moment.
Hello?
I'm still here.
Yes. Yeah, I'm a paramedic, and so he's just...
Okay.
She started puking in her sleep, and then now she's...
Okay.
And nobody heard it until probably about 2 minutes later. So then...
Is she still unconscious? We do have to ask you again.
Yeah, she's probably... She's only withdrawing the pain right now.
All
she
right.
cleared her airway, and then she's been unresponsive. Then she puked again, and then she responded when I started trying to get her to respond to pain.
Okay. Do you have her on her side, sir?
Yeah, she's in the recovery position.
Okay. I'm sending the paramedics to help you now. Stay on the line, and I'll tell you exactly what to do next. If there's a defibrillator available, send someone to get it now in case we need it later, okay?
We don't have a defibrillator, so...
That's okay. It's just an instruction.
The only thing we'd be doing is chest compressions and...
Okay. So
she's breathing just fine, and she has a normal pulse.
Okay. I'm sending the paramedics to help you now. Stay on the line, and I'll tell you exactly what to do next. Are you right by her now?
Yeah, I'm holding her.
Okay. Listen carefully. Lay her flat on her back on the floor or the ground and remove any pillows.
She's already on her back on the floor.
Okay, and she might be, since you are a paramedic. I'm going to read this for both of our, to cover both of us, okay? Kneel
Yeah, I know.
next to her and look into her mouth for any food or vomit.
I cleared her airway already.
I understand. Turn her head
Okay,
to the side, and you said you've already cleared her. I'm going to read you the instruction. Turn her head to the side and clean out her mouth and nose.
Okay.
Okay, check her breathing.
Okay.
And now place your hand on her forehead and your other hand under her neck, and then carefully tilt the head back. Just put your ear next to her mouth, okay?
Paramedics are here already.
All right, sir. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I shortened some of the pauses for time, but in real time, it took 58 seconds, nearly a full minute, for Jeanie to tell the dispatcher that her daughter was unresponsive after aspirating. At 11:27 a.m., an ambulance took Macy to the Cape Fear Valley Medical Center in Fayetteville. When she arrived, Macy was unresponsive, and medical staff took one look at the bruises and abrasions covering her body and called the police to report a toddler with life-threatening injuries they considered consistent with child abuse. Although both Jeanie and Zachary later told police that Macy was throwing up while wearing her pajamas, a photo Jeanie took of Macy upon arrival at the ER says otherwise. When Macy Grace arrived at the ER, her long brown hair was neatly braided, and she was wearing a brand-new maroon and white striped dress with the tag still attached. Macy's core temperature was 92 degrees Fahrenheit, or 33 degrees Celsius, when she arrived at the hospital, and medical staff had to warm her up to raise her temperature. As her flesh warmed to a normal temperature, even more bruises started showing up. I'll include photos of some of her injuries in the Facebook photo album for this episode. At 1:55 p.m. the same day, Macy Grace was transferred to UNC hospitals in Chapel Hill with a diagnosis of a non-survivable brain injury. She was placed on life support in the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit, or PICU. Doctors at UNC determined that Macy's injuries were inflicted within 24 hours of her arrival at Cape Fear Valley. UNC medical records indicated concern for non-accidental trauma, including a note about bruising on the neck that staff considered concerning for handprint pattern. In the photos, you'll also see what appear to be fingernail marks on her neck. On the evening of December 3rd, Jeannie's aunt, Michelle Smith, saw Macy's injuries in person and immediately called Jeanie out, asking her what had happened to the baby. This sparked a huge argument, leading to Jeanie having Michelle banned from seeing Macy Grace in the PICU. The following morning, after determining that Macy Grace had minimal brain activity, doctors pronounced brain death at 6:59 a.m. on December 4th. Her paternal grandmother, Tina Goodwin, told the Fayetteville Observer that medical staff kept Macy Grace on life support until her son, Kevin, could get home from his deployment overseas. She said Kevin was shocked when the Red Cross contacted him about Macy Grace on December 2nd and arranged for him to fly home. Tina said, "His reality was shattered." After Kevin received that call, Tina said, she was walking in the door of her house with an armload of birthday gifts for Macy Grace when Kevin called to tell her his daughter was in the hospital on life support. "This is a 2-year-old baby that got the life beaten out of her for no reason at all. We'll know the how, the what, the when, but we'll never know the why." At the hospital, Macy Grace's daddy gave his daughter one last bath. Then, life-saving measures were withdrawn, and on December 4th, 2015, Macy died, just 10 days before her 3rd birthday. Funeral services were held on December 21st, 2015, at the John F. Kennedy Memorial Chapel in Fort Bragg. Army Major Chaplain Matthew Sprecher officiated the ceremony. Although Jeanie had somehow managed to obtain a military restraining order against Kevin, he was fortunately able to attend Macy Grace's funeral. So was Jeanie's Aunt Michelle, although Jeanie tried to start a fight with Michelle, saying she wasn't allowed to be there. 2 days later, Macy was buried at the Sand Hills State Veterans Cemetery in Spring Lake, North Carolina. The fact that it's a military cemetery is why the headstone mentions Jeanie's name and rank. Kevin, however, is not mentioned. You'll hear the reason for that during my conversation with Michelle in Part 2. The full epitaph reads, Macy Grace Ditty, December 14, 2012 to December 4, 2015. Daughter of SPC Jeanie Ditty, U.S. Army. Rest in peace, sweet angel. I'll pause here for a quick sponsor break. Jeanie told multiple people various versions of the events that took place on the morning of December 2, 2015. She told a photographer who reached out with condolences via Facebook message that she gave Macy a banana, she choked on it, and then she choked on her vomit, which cut off oxygen to her brain. When interviewed, Jeanie told the Fayetteville Police that Macy fell in the bathtub and hit her head on December 1, 2015. She told police she called Zach Kiefer, her paramedic boyfriend, when Macy Grace wasn't feeling well on December 2nd. She said Zach checked on the baby, who initially seemed fine. About 25 minutes after he arrived, Zach heard the child making a strange noise and told Jeanie that Macy Grace appeared to be aspirating on her vomit. Jeanie called 911, and she and Macy arrived at Cape Fear Valley by ambulance soon afterward. While at the hospital on the morning of December 2nd, Jeanie texted her Aunt Michelle that DSS was investigating her, writing, "Well, I have to get investigated because she puked. She lost oxygen to her brain when she aspirated, and they tried saying it was abuse. She has no bleeding on her brain, just oxygen loss." This was patently false. Macy suffered from bleeding on both sides of her brain. Jeanie told one friend first that Macy choked on a banana. Then, on another occasion, she claimed that Macy Grace was sick and aspirated on vomit, and another time she said that one of Macy's lungs collapsed due to not breathing. Others said Jeanie told them that Zach was babysitting for Macy Grace that morning while Jeanie had a medical appointment at Fort Bragg. Before she left, she said Macy was fine, but when she got home about an hour later, Macy was in distress, so she called 911. She told another friend the banana story, saying she was present when that happened, but she later told the same friend that she wasn't there. She claimed that Zach was babysitting Macy Grace at the time because Jeanie was in the ICU at the hospital with serious trauma injuries caused by abuse from none other than Zach himself. According to the friend, Jeanie spun a fanciful tale about being in a coma and awakening to detectives asking her to draw them a diagram of Macy's bedroom. At one point, Jeanie also claimed that Zach was watching Macy while she was working, not mentioning the alleged abuse at all or her doctor's appointment. Is your head spinning yet? Soon after Macy Grace died, Zach separated from his wife. Jeanie and Zach's relationship got serious, and the couple moved to a different apartment, Unit 202, at 515 Village Lake Court in Spring Lake. Less than 3 weeks after Macy's death, Jeanie began trying to sell Macy's belongings, including her Frozen-themed bedding, on Facebook yard sale pages. When called out by commenters who asked, "Haven't you just lost your daughter?" Jeanie claimed she just couldn't stand looking at Macy's things anymore. By this point, Jeanie's family was well beyond suspicious, and they weren't keeping those suspicions to themselves. Jeanie told everyone who would listen that she was pressing charges on various family members for slander, threats, and so on. Those charges never materialized, nor did she ever file a civil suit along the same lines. The family wasn't alone in their suspicions. The Fayetteville Police Department was also investigating both Jeanie and Zach for murder, even though Macy Grace's cause and manner of death hadn't yet been finalized. During the investigation, both Jeanie and Zach were given polygraph exams. Of course, polygraph results aren't admissible in court, but they are a great investigative tool. Jeanie's first test showed signs of deception. She flat out failed her second. On his, Zach was asked 4 relevant questions. Are you the person who inflicted the injuries to Macy? Do you know who hurt Macy? Did you help in any way in the hurting of Macy? Are you withholding any information about what happened to Macy? Zach answered no to all 4 questions, and the examiner's opinion was that he was telling the truth, saying the test outcome strongly supports the truthfulness of Mr. Kiefer. An autopsy was conducted on December 7, 2015 by the North Carolina Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, although the results wouldn't be released for over 3 months. The autopsy, which described Macy Grace as 3 feet 3 inches tall and weighing 38 pounds, detailed a vast number of injuries on her tiny body. The autopsy report stated that Macy Grace had endured blunt force trauma, which caused 1. Extensive scalp hemorrhages and other external head injuries with multiple impact sites on various planes of the head. 2. Bilateral frontal subdural hemorrhage or bleeding on both sides of the brain. The bleeding was more severe on the left side than the right. 3. Cerebral edema with right uncle notching, which basically means her brain herniated due to pressure from swelling on the other side. 4. Laceration of right buccal/gum mucosa with evidence of healing. Essentially, Macy Grace had a 1-inch laceration between her gums and cheek on the right side, as well as a bruise and a 1/4-inch hemorrhage in her mouth. Injuries in the mouth like this often happen as a result of the impact of the teeth against the flesh, such as when someone is hit or punched in the face. 5. Small, healing liver lacerations. Most liver injuries also occur due to blunt force trauma, like from a car accident, a fall, or personal violence. 6. Numerous scattered contusions and several scattered, scabbed abrasions. 7. Acute and organizing bronchopneumonia with diffuse alveolar damage. Pneumonia is common in patients who have been placed on a ventilator, which Macy was for 2 days. Macy Grace had soft tissue bruises over her entire body. She also had a cut behind her ear and a swollen neck. Some of her bruises were in a linear pattern, suggesting she was struck by an object, which a doctor later testified could have been an electrical cord. Patches of Macy Grace's hair were torn out and reportedly found in the apartment's bathtub drain. All of these clearly inflicted injuries were listed separately from a massive number of punctures and other evidence of medical intervention. Ultimately, on March 23, 2016, the medical examiner's office ruled Macy Grace's death a homicide caused by complications of blunt force trauma, stating that asphyxial injuries, such as from smothering, strangulation, or attempted drowning, could not be excluded. The next morning, which was Thursday, March 24, 2016, arrest warrants were issued for both Jeanie Cassandra Ditty and Zachary Earl Kiefer. The very same day, Fayetteville Police Department's homicide detectives arrested 23-year-old Jeanie Ditty and charged her with first-degree murder and negligent child abuse inflicting serious bodily injury. 32-year-old Zachary Kiefer faced the same charges, but police couldn't initially locate him. They asked for the public's help locating Zach, who turned himself in the following day. Both were held without bail in the Cumberland County Detention Center. Their charges made both eligible for the death penalty, although the prosecutor hadn't announced whether or not they would seek capital punishment. According to Fort Bragg officials, Jeanie would remain an active military member while she was investigated for her daughter's murder. Jeanie and Zach's first court appearance took place at the jail before District Court Judge Stephen Stokes. They were represented by Cumberland County Chief Public Defender Bernard Condlin, who would continue to represent Jeanie through her trial. After the court appearance, District Attorney Billy West said that Macy Grace's death was horrific, Whoever is responsible, we're going to hold them accountable. It's a tough case.
Once we saw that report, it indicated that the child did not die of natural causes, and the cause of death was listed as homicide, and we proceeded with warrants at that time.
Macy Grace's Nana, Tina Goodwin, told Inside Edition,
"There's not enough justice in this world for what she did to the one person that she gave birth to, that she was supposed to protect and love."
It came out the month after the arrests that Zach was also accused of multiple crimes related to a domestic disturbance in Cameron, North Carolina, involving a woman from Harnett County, who was later revealed to be his estranged wife, Lisa. That alleged incident took place less than 3 weeks after Macy's death. On December 22, 2015, Harnett County Emergency Communications received 2 calls from Lisa asking for help. Before she could elaborate, the line disconnected both times. The Harnett County Sheriff's Office responded to the residence where the calls originated and found Zach there, along with Lisa, who was described as seriously injured. Court documents accused Zach of punching Lisa, body slamming her into a bathtub, threatening to kill her multiple times, pointing a gun at her, and taking the phone away from her as she attempted to call 911 twice. All of this was alleged to have taken place during the same incident. The following day, Zach was charged with first-degree kidnapping, misdemeanor assault, misdemeanor communicating threats, misdemeanor assault by pointing a gun, and misdemeanor interfering with emergency communication. He was held without bail at the Harnett County Detention Center for 48 hours, then released on $17,000 bail. He would remain free until his March arrest. According to Sergeant First Class Joy Doolin, a U.S. Army Human Resources Command spokeswoman, Zachary ended his 12 years and 7 months of service with the Army in December 2015, although she wouldn't confirm or deny that the domestic abuse charges had anything to do with that, saying, "The discharge status of any soldier is not releasable information." She did confirm that, while in the Army, Zach reached the rank of Sergeant First Class as an infantryman and Special Forces Medical Sergeant. He was deployed 4 times, once to Iraq, twice to Afghanistan, and once to Kyrgyzstan. During his service, he earned over 12 awards, including a Purple Heart. Looking back at Jeannie's Facebook posts, there were a few potential child abuse red flags. She posted a photo on March 3, 2015, of Macy sitting on the floor, crying. The caption read, "When your child covers your house in toothpaste while you're in the shower, then gives attitude and tells you no. Sorry, honey, Mama ain't got time for that tood, and sure as hell ain't gonna baby it." She continued in the same post's comments, "She's gonna know what a sore ass feels like by the end of the day. I'm about to break out the wooden spoon." Later, Inside Edition aired 2 short pieces about Macy Grace's story. During their coverage, they played a video showing a younger Macy Grace standing on furniture while Jeanie filmed and admonished her.
"What do you think you're doing on my nightstand? Macy Grace, you want to get grounded? I get spanking?"
Jeannie's Aunt Michelle posted on Facebook a few days after Jeannie's arrest. Part of the post read, "No, the family never saw something that alarmed us to this degree. Her lack of patience or ease at letting Macy have many babysitters, or her relaxed behavior letting her child spend months and weeks away from home with my family, or her Nana and her father's family, bothered us, but we got to spend the time with Macy. When we would ask about the bruises or the lack of communication, we would get she was sick or didn't feel good or was having a sleepover at the babysitter's house. The bruises explained away by Macy's growth and development. As the family, you believe the person you love. The day this phone call came to me from Jeanie, I was the first call. I was who she wanted to be there with her. Our relationship changed once I saw that baby with my own eyes. Jeanie died that day and Macy the next. I mourn the loss of them both. Macy is gone, Jeanie is gone, and the lies are so many, so deep, it's almost like I never knew Jeanie at all." In the comments on another Facebook post about the case, 2 of Jeannie's friends or acquaintances discussed Jeannie's care of Macy. The first said, "Macy was always neglected in her care." The second replied, "Right, remember how their babysitters would drop Macy off at the gym when Jeanie got off work, and then she'd use the 2 hours of childcare until Macy's bedtime?" The first responded back, "Yup, she never took care of her." Macy was always filthy and unkempt. Her babysitters were always really worried about Macy. I feel badly saying that about Macy. She was the sweetest little girl. I loved when she would come behind the desk with us. It is clear as day to anyone who knew them that Macy was in danger and not cared for. Another friend used to babysit Macy when she was first born, but she said after she questioned Jeanie regarding a few things, Jeanie stopped asking her to babysit. According to the friend regarding Macy, I remember one time it literally looked like she hadn't had a bath in weeks, and her hair was knotted up pretty bad. As for Jeanie, the woman said, she would make up the craziest stories for attention. At one point, me and another mom who worked at the gym daycare reported her to CPS, but nothing ever happened with it as far as I know. This was before she was with Zach. Another friend later wrote, what people need to realize is anyone who has ever questioned Ms. Ditty's parenting or lifestyle or even had concerns for Macy's well-being was immediately dragged through the mud, called drug addicts, abusers, and scumbags. They were immediately removed from Macy's life. She would refuse to let people see her, communicate with her. Jeanie would tell one side of the family horrible things about the other side of the family to turn everybody against each other so they can never come together and call her out on her shit. Time for another quick sponsor break. After Jeanie's arrest, a Hazleton, Pennsylvania photographer named Sonny Joe came forward to talk about his interactions with Jeanie. Sonny specialized in making photo keepsakes for people who'd lost loved ones, calling his tribute photo package One More Time. Sonny told reporters that after he heard about Macy Grace's death, he reached out to Jeanie with his condolences. A month later, in January, Jeanie contacted him, seeming like a distraught, bereaved mother. Jeanie asked him to create a series of altered photos in which she was pictured visiting Macy's grave, and Macy Grace appeared as a ghostly angel. She sent Sonny a few photos of herself posing at the cemetery, and when he returned the retouched photos to her, she posted them everywhere. I'll include those in today's photo album as well. After Jeanie was arrested, Sonny quickly received countless Facebook messages and tags thanks to his watermark on those photos. He said, people were threatening me, cops were calling me. I felt terrible, honestly, thinking I was somehow involved in this woman portraying herself as an innocent woman. He was angry and embarrassed when he found out about Jeanie's arrest, saying, I was horrified, then angry I'd been duped. Although Jeanie offered to pay for the pictures, Sonny was so moved by her story that he did the work, about $500 worth of photo editing, for free. I knew that it was a grieving mother, and I felt so bad that she lost her 2-year-old daughter that I jumped right on it. Knowing that she used me and that she used this to possibly make herself seem innocent, that's the worst feeling in the world. When he found out about Jeanie's arrest, Sonny said, I called the detective in charge of the situation, and I find out that she wanted these photos just to lie to the public, to cover up what she did so she can look like the grieving mother. Sonny told Inside Edition,
she used my work to make people think that she's innocent.
What did she want in the photos?
She told me that her daughter's favorite book was The Giving Tree. And she said, I want me holding the book, reading it to my daughter, Macy, who passed away. And I want to be looking down at her while she's reading the book. She wanted this more than any other photo. When I look at that photo now, I see, Mommy, why'd you do this?
Regarding these photos, Macy's Nana, Tina Goodwin, said, she was mocking that baby's death. She honestly thought she was getting away with that baby's death. She showed more attention to that baby in her death than when that baby was alive. Also after Jeanie's arrest, it came out that after Macy's death, Zach and Jeanie created a GoFundMe page to pay for Macy Grace's funeral. The page stated, this GoFundMe account is for the funeral expenses of Macy Ditty. All money donated to this account will go toward Jeanie Ditty, Vengeance, to use as she sees necessary. Macy Grace Ditty passed on December 4, 2015, surrounded by family and loved ones. 2 days prior, Macy tragically began to vomit in her sleep at home due to unforeseen illness. Macy was showered with love and affection from the moment she was born. She was raised in a single-parent home, with Jeanie providing as much care and love as she could. Everyone Macy came across knew how happy and loved she was, Jeannie's cousin, Tiffany Wardy, said she reached out to Jeanie when she saw the GoFundMe, telling her that either she or Kevin had a military insurance policy that would cover Macy's funeral expenses. Jason Doerr, a spokesman for Kevin's Army unit, told the Fayetteville Observer that Family Service Members Group Life Insurance provides life insurance coverage to the spouse and dependent children of service members. Children are covered for $10,000. According to Kevin's mother, Tina, Kevin told Jeanie he would pay for all of the funeral expenses, and he followed through with his word. However, in a Facebook post, Jeanie indicated the opposite about money from her estranged husband. Can't get it, and Kevin would get it, and he's been no help. Tiffany and others, suspicious of Jeanie's comments, reported the fundraiser to GoFundMe, but Zach removed it from the site himself, although not before the page received $6,000 in donations. It is unknown what those donations were used for. In January 2018, Jeanie had a whole new story. Now she said she was afraid of Zach, who forced her to help him cover up Macy's murder. She claimed Zach caused Macy Grace's death alone, but she had no choice but to go along with his story because she was afraid for her life. She claimed Zach was abusive. However, 2 months after Macy Grace died, Jeanie posted bodybuilding photos of herself, in which most of her skin was visible and unmarked, except for her fake tan and tattoos. She also didn't appear injured in a photo of herself and Macy in the pool the previous summer. As for Zach, he contended that he was factually innocent. His attorney, Mr. George, said Zach's position was that Jeanie called him to her apartment on the morning of December 2nd because something was wrong with Macy Grace, and he was a paramedic. He said that Macy was vomiting through her nose, her jaw was clenched, and her limbs were moving involuntarily, indicating her brain was deprived of oxygen. Zach tried to save Macy while he told Jeanie to call 911. That differed from Jeanie's version of events, in which she was now saying that Zach was watching Macy Grace that morning while she went to her Fort Bragg medical appointment. When she got home about an hour later, Macy was in distress, so she called 911. During court testimony and a videotaped police interview, Jeanie did not initially say that she left Macy Grace alone with Zach. She told police that she was at her medical appointment from about 9:38 a.m. until about 10 a.m. and called Zach at 10:15 a.m. Her defense attorney, Mr. Conlon, acknowledged to the media that Jeanie was initially untruthful. Initially? Google Maps tells me the drive from the Stone Mason apartment complex to Fort Bragg around that time of morning is between 20 and 40 minutes, depending on traffic and road conditions, so there's definitely something wrong about Jeanie's timeline that morning. Also, there are no medical records of Jeanie being seen by a doctor that day. It appears she checked into the wellness center and left. Sounds like alibi building to me. Despite Jeanie's changing stories, in early 2018, Cumberland County prosecutors offered her a plea deal in which she would plead guilty to accessory after the fact to murder. She would have to testify against Zach in exchange for a sentence of no less than 3 years and 8 months, most of which she had already served by that point, and no more than 5 years and 5 months. She was reportedly cooperating with the prosecutor and investigators, according to Mr. Conlon, but suddenly, in March 2018, they took the plea deal off the table. That occurred after Cumberland County District Attorney Billy West announced that his office had a conflict of interest, although he wouldn't publicly specify what it was, and he recused his office from the case. Mecklenburg County District Attorney Julia Ann Wolf-Hijazi took over as prosecutor, and in March 2018, she withdrew the plea deal formerly offered to Jeanie. During a hearing in November 2018, the prosecutor told the court that she offered new deals to both Zach and Jeanie, but she did not state the specifics. A year later, in November 2019, shockingly, the prosecution dropped Zach's charges altogether. Jeanie's charges stood. On the dismissal document, Prosecutor Hijazi wrote, "New medical information provides a clearer timeline of events and contradicts previous medical information." She added that the new information affected the likelihood of conviction and meeting the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Zach's defense attorney, Tony Buzzard, said that medical evidence showed Macy Grace's fatal injuries were inflicted at least 12 hours before Jeanie called 911, which the evidence indicated was hours before Zach arrived. Jeannie's attorney, Mr. Conlon, said the evidence of when Macy was beaten changed again after Zach's charges were dropped. He said a radiologist who concluded that Macy's injuries occurred hours before Zachary arrived at the apartment withdrew that opinion after consulting other doctors, saying his opinion was in error. So the experts do not agree on when the time occurred, and we have an expert that will obviously say when Mr. Kiefer had exclusive control of Macy. I couldn't find any information confirming what Mr. Conlon was saying here, but the timing of Macy Grace's injuries would be a point of hot debate during Jeannie's trial. Zach was released on November 1, 2019, after spending almost 44 months in the Cumberland County Detention Center. He later said, "I would say it's probably the toughest thing I ever had to go through in my life, being accused of something I didn't do. And it's hard to get a voice and to get people to believe you in the justice system." Zach described himself as being ground up and spit out in the machinery of the court system, adding, "And they kind of squeeze you to take a plea." He said he would now focus on rebuilding his life and being a good father to his then 8-year-old daughter. He still faced charges of assaulting his estranged wife 3 weeks after Macy's death, although he said of that incident, "It never happened. I never put my hands on her." Now, time for one last sponsor break. Jury selection for the murder trial of Jeanie Cassandra Ditty began on March 9, 2020. One key dispute during the trial was whether or not Jeanie would be allowed to present evidence that Zachary Kiefer was the real killer. Jeannie's defense team, which consisted of Public Defender Bernard Conlon and Deputy Public Defender Cindy Blackwell, asked Superior Court Judge J. Stan Carmichael, who presided over the trial, to let them present evidence from the Fayetteville Police investigation against Zach, as well as evidence from his estranged wife, Lisa. Mr. Conlon said Zach incriminated himself during a police interview. He also said he had evidence that Zach beat Lisa for 5 hours after she was interviewed by the Fayetteville Police about Macy Grace's death. Mr. Conlon claimed that Lisa's injuries were similar to those Macy had when she died. Those charges against Zach regarding the beating of Lisa had been dismissed a year or so before Jeannie's trial. Medical documents stated that although Lisa claimed the assault caused injury to her head and neck, there was no evidence of intracranial hemorrhaging or fractures to the skull or cervical spine. Even so, the judge ultimately allowed the defense to present their evidence that Zach had committed Macy Grace's fatal assault. One of the prosecution's arguments for Jeannie's guilt was her apparent lack of emotion around the time of Macy Grace's death. During her opening statement, Prosecutor Hijazi cited the baby's bruises and brain damage, Jeannie's changing explanations of what happened, and her chilling absence of emotion. "Too many injuries, too many stories, too much indifference. Remember that as you evaluate the evidence in this case." The prosecutor gave examples of Jeannie's emotionlessness. She mentioned Jeannie's eerie indifference during her 911 call as she described Macy's condition. Police interview footage of Fayetteville homicide detective Daniel Johnson interviewing Jeannie showed her calmly describing the days leading up to the 911 call. Jurors also heard a telephone recording of a call Jeannie made to her apartment complex's property manager after they refused to let Zach onto the property. During that call, Jeannie grew incensed, threatening to sue the property manager and charge the police investigating Macy's case. She didn't lose control throughout the time of her daughter's hospitalization and death, but she flew off the handle when her boyfriend wasn't allowed to come over. Several witnesses also described Jeannie as lacking emotion, saying she was perfectly calm while an EMT examined Macy Grace at the apartment. She remained calm at the hospital while Macy was treated and during a police interview that evening after doctors had concluded Macy Grace had incurred a fatal brain injury from being hit in the head. EMTs and Cape Fear Valley Medical Center nurses testified about being disturbed by Jeannie's demeanor. Nurse Michelle Smith, no relation to Jeannie's aunt, said, "Just from past experience, most of the time parents are really distraught when something traumatic has happened to their child. Mom didn't really show any emotion." Nurse practitioner Holly Gross said she met with Jeanie on December 4, 2015 at UNC Chapel Hill to discuss Macy Grace's condition and testified that while Jeanie showed Holly pictures of her daughter on her phone, her disposition was casual and not usual for a parent whose child was near death. She was, for lack of a better word, happy. Several nurses and doctors testified that when Jeanie was told that Macy Grace wouldn't survive because she had been fatally beaten, Jeanie responded, "Well, I guess that makes me a bad fucking mother." Other trial testimony indicated that Macy suffered multiple blows to the head, causing severe brain damage. Doctors believed she was hit at least 30 times. The prosecution rested its case on March 13th. Mr. Conlon filed a motion to dismiss all charges against his client, saying the state hadn't proven its burden and that even though his client was the only one with Macy Grace at the time of her injuries, it didn't mean Jeanie killed her. The judge swiftly denied the motion. On March 17, 2020, the jury heard text messages Jeanie wrote, in which she complained to Zach about Macy Grace vomiting and having diarrhea. In the texts, Jeanie told him that she lit Macy up, beat her for defecating in her diaper, and forced her into a cold bath. Another text detailed how Macy was so afraid that she ran away from her mother and hid in a closet. Jeanie said she picked Macy up and continued hitting her, bragging to Zach via text, "I'll give her a reason to be scared, the little bitch." It's worth noting that a nurse who specialized in child abuse cases had testified earlier that child abuse frequently occurs when children are potty training. In the texts, Jeanie also complained that she had a headache and a stomachache from the smell of Macy's diarrhea, caring more about how Macy Grace's illness affected her than Macy herself. She told Zach that she finally drugged Macy Grace, who wasn't even 3 years old, with melatonin and made her stand in a corner until the sick little girl passed out, at which point Jeanie moved her to the couch. Finally, she wrote, Macy Grace put herself to bed. Phone records confirmed that all of those text messages were undelivered, meaning Zach never saw a single one of them. He heard those messages for the first time during Jeanie's trial. According to testimony, on December 1, 2015, Jeanie took Macy to Hope Mills pediatrician Dr. Forrest S. Whitaker, who testified that during that visit he saw no injuries on Macy Grace. He said that besides her gastrointestinal issues, the little girl appeared normal and talkative and had good energy. During closing arguments, the prosecutor told the jury that Jeanie was enraged because Macy Grace had been having frequent dirty diapers, and because of her anger, Jeanie had been hitting her daughter for days. The prosecution's version of events was that Jeanie fatally beat Macy Grace before she went to her doctor's appointment at the Wellness Center at Fort Bragg. She either left Macy home alone afterward or brought her along and left her in the car, gravely injured. After she returned home, Zach arrived, and 30 minutes later, he noticed Macy was in distress. The defense's closing statement again tried pointing the finger at Zach Kiefer. They continued to disagree with the prosecution's statements that Macy's injuries occurred hours before Zach arrived at the apartment, claiming they could have happened shortly before the 911 call when Zach was present. After both sides rested, the case went to the jury for deliberation on Wednesday, March 18, 2020. A first-degree murder conviction in North Carolina would carry an automatic sentence of life in prison without parole. Prosecutors were not seeking the death penalty against Jeanie. On Friday, March 20th, the jury returned. Unfortunately, they didn't have good news. The jury was hung 10-2 in favor of Jeanie's guilt. In the U.S., a person can't be convicted without a unanimous decision from all 12 members of the jury. The 2 jurors who voted to acquit Jeanie weren't convinced by the prosecutor's evidence that she beat Macy Grace in the days leading up to her death. According to members of the family who were present, the 2 jurors' main hang-up was the concept of Jeanie's hands being considered a deadly weapon. Without any other choice, Judge Carmichael declared a mistrial. Jeanie was remanded back to jail with her bail set at $300,000. A few months after the trial, former Cumberland County Chief Public Defender Bernard Conlon resigned from his position, and private attorney Malia Kimry took over as lead of Jeanie's defense. In April 2021, Jeanie was offered a new plea deal that would allow her to plead guilty to second-degree murder. She replied that she would only plead guilty to felony child abuse with intent, hindering a police investigation, and accessory. When asked, quite rightly, accessory to what? She refused the deal and told the prosecution to take her to trial again. When the family asked about what defense Jeanie would use at her second trial, they were told, "We have no idea what she is going to do. She hasn't talked about Mr. Kiefer one time to her new attorney, so we get to be surprised like everyone else." 4 days before Jeanie's second trial was scheduled to begin in November 2021, Ms. Kimry filed a motion to enforce the plea deal Jeanie was offered before her first trial. Despite 2 prior judges denying the same motion, Superior Court Judge James Floyd Ammons, Jr. inexplicably approved the motion, and the prosecution quickly filed for a reconsideration hearing, at which Judge Ammons essentially tore Ms. Hijazi apart, telling her that he felt Jeanie was the victim in this situation, and that he personally felt Zach Kiefer, who was no longer charged, was the guilty party. He asked the state to drop the charges against Jeanie, but they refused, filing an appeal with the North Carolina Court of Appeals. This action placed a stay on Jeanie's criminal case until the appeals court decides on the matter. The original charges against Jeanie are still pending, but no new trial date is currently set, a full 4 years after the first trial, and 8.5 years after Macy Grace was murdered. Prepare to get even angrier. Even though no motion was filed to change Jeanie's bond amount, Judge Ammons reduced her bail, and in November 2021, he allowed her to be released from jail on an unsecured $25,000 signature bond. Understandably, Macy Grace's family was outraged at Jeanie's release. Paternal grandmother Tina Goodwin told WRAL News that family members would have taken Macy if Jeanie couldn't care for her. She had options.
"We will fight to our last breath until this baby gets the justice that she deserves."
Jeanie's aunt, Michelle Smith, said,
"To say that we are devastated, that's not even a big enough word. I'm worried that she is going to hurt someone else."
The family said they would fight Jeanie's plea deal to the end. For the record, Judge Ammons has had a controversial past. In 1996, the North Carolina Supreme Court, upon the recommendation of the Judicial Standards Commission, censured Judge Ammons, according to court documents, for conduct prejudicial to the administration of justice that brings the judicial office into disrepute, based on his actions in a worthless check case in which the prosecuting witness was a personal friend of his. Also for issuing an ex parte arrest order in a separate custody dispute. In 2011, the commission investigated and publicly reprimanded Judge Ammons for granting motions to void the convictions of 3 separate defendants and order new trials before those motions were even filed in court. Then, in 2023, the judge wrongfully resentenced a man who was unconstitutionally sentenced in 2001 to life without parole for murder at the age of 17. The man's attorneys appealed Judge Ammons' decision, and just this week, the appeals court vacated Judge Ammons' amended sentence and remanded the defendant for resentencing that would this time adhere to the Superior Court's instructions. As far as I can tell, this man is still the judge assigned to Jeanie's case. Since Jeanie's appeal, the prosecution has also changed hands. The lead prosecutor is now Lisa Coltrane, a homicide and arson resource prosecutor based in Raleigh. She also refuses to drop Jeanie's charges. Meanwhile, by the end of 2022, Jeanie and Kevin were finally divorced, and Jeanie had set up a dating profile under the name Jenna, where she wrote, "I've been through hell. I have a past, but I have a present and a future. I'm upfront and honest, and I don't want someone who's not understanding. Let's do shit together, be partners, but I'm just going through life changes right now." You know, life changes that include being charged with her 2-year-old daughter's murder. Some of those life changes might also be related to Jeanie's rapidly changing appearance, from tattooed eyebrows to lip injections to who knows what else. She looks like a different human being in every photo I've seen of her, almost as if she's an accused murderer trying to hide in plain sight. Anyway, the dating profile must have done its job, because in November of 2023, Jeanie gave birth to a baby girl, of whom she does have custody, despite having active charges for the murder of her previous child. In case you need some good news, which I certainly do, here's a very special, heartwarming detail. Through the tragedy of Macy's loss, a pair of best friends found each other. Macy's Nana Tina and Aunt Shelley have become inseparable, considering each other ride or die and partners in crime. It's beautiful to see a little silver lining, isn't it? Jeannie's Aunt Michelle runs a Facebook page called Justice for Macy, where she gives updates on the case and posts endless adorable photos of Macy. I'll include a link to the page in today's show notes. Macy Grace Ditty was a happy, bright, energetic little girl who loved spending time with her family. She had a perfect baby doll face with big, sparkling brown eyes, a big smile, and long, brown, often wild, fairy hair. She had a ton of curiosity and a ton of joy for life. She loved the movie Frozen, chocolate cupcakes, corn on the cob, drinking her milk, chasing butterflies, blowing bubbles, swimming, going to the zoo, and smelling every flower she came across. She liked waking up super early because whenever the sky was awake, Macy Grace had to be awake. She also loved when her Aunt Shelley and Uncle Bobby would play This Little Piggy with her perfect little feet. Macy Grace loved sparkles, butterflies, dogs, spiders, and worms. Here's a clip of Macy Grace saying goodnight.
Say goodnight.
Hey.
Say goodnight.
Hey.
Blow kisses.
Hey.
In this clip, Macy Grace is reading her Uncle Bobby the Riot Act.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, you better know. Really? Okay, you win. It's Aunt Jelly's fault. Really? Don't you tell me.
Here's Macy Grace doing some happy jabbering with her Aunt Shelley.
Hey.
Here's Macy Grace playing with Uncle Bobby on the stairs.
Get my coat on. Be careful. What are you doing? Come here.
In part 2 of Macy Grace's story, you'll hear my conversation with her Aunt Shelley, Jeannie's aunt, Michelle Smith, who will never give up on justice for Macy. My sources for this episode were the Fayetteville Observer, WRAL News, 16 WNEP, WNCT 9 on your side, ABC 12 News Now, The New York Times, Inside Edition, Metro, Heavy, Instant Checkmate, Google Maps, NC Newsline, the Lafayette Funeral Home website, Find a Grave, Michelle Smith, and the Justice for Macy Facebook page. Shoutouts to my newest patrons. Thank you to Nancy A. from Elgin, Illinois, Sheila M. from Niagara Falls, New York, April M. from Funkstown, Maryland, and from Middle Earth, thank you to Lily B., Kim B., and Sumya H. I appreciate you all so much. You can help support the show at patreon.com/stlcpod. That's it for this episode. Join me next time for part 2 of Macy's story. If you like the show, please follow or subscribe to Suffer the Little Children on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Spreaker, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast listening app. And please leave me a 5-star rating and a positive review on your favorite podcast platform. Visit the website at sufferthelittlechildrenpod.com. You can support the show by visiting patreon.com/stlcpod, where you can become a patron for rewards ranging from a shout-out by name on the show to bonus content and exclusive gifts. You can also support the show at ko-fi.com/stlcpod. Follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Suffer the Little Children Pod and on TikTok at STLCpod. View photos related to today's episode on Facebook. This podcast is researched, written, hosted, edited, and produced by Lane. Intro theme music is by Dream Note Music, and all music for the show is licensed from audiojungle.net. For more information about preventing or reporting child abuse, visit childhelp.org or call your area's child abuse hotline. And remember, if you see something, say something.